All right, so again, in our classes folder, so I'm gonna go to classes, animation, rigging, and simulation, and then week 5, there are gonna be a few files that we're gonna wanna grab, potentially, so that we can start this project. So inside, I do have my run and jump reference. So here it says run and jump. This is what I'm going to be using as my reference. You are more than welcome to use this if you would like. Otherwise, you can either shoot your own reference outside of class, or you can wait until Friday, and hopefully, if the weather permits, we'll be able to shoot reference during class on Friday. If you do shoot your own reference, though, please keep in mind a couple things. One, ideally, your footage would be shot at 24 frames per second. So most DSLR cameras should have the setting where you can go in and specify that it shoots at 24 frames. Smart devices are kind of hit or miss, so you'll want to check your smartphone. So if you do use your phone to shoot your reference, just check to see if there is a setting you can specify in the video settings to shoot at 24 frames per second. If you can't shoot at 24 frames per second, it's okay to still shoot the footage. If it does come in at, let's say, 30 frames, you can always drop it down to 24 frames in After Effects. And so you'll want to refer to the video either from the walk cycle, or I'll actually provide a video from about a year or two ago where I show more or less the same process for cutting together your footage. You'll also want to make sure, so if you do shoot your own footage, you absolutely need to have this frame counter here so that we can actually find what frame our key extremes are on, and then when we get to the breakdown or in between poses, what frames those are on. You do not want to guess this information. You don't want to make it up, or yeah, like I said, guesstimate it. You'll definitely want this frame count on here. So again, you'll want to follow along with the video where you do this in After Effects. And so you don't want to make this information up. Um, Something else to keep in mind, so if you do shoot this on your own, you'll want to make sure the entire performance is on camera. So you will need at least one view from your camera, and I'd recommend doing a side view like I have here. If we're able to shoot it on Friday, we'll do a front and side, but bare minimum, you would need at least a side view. And what you'll want to do is at the very beginning of the animation, so you'll see here on frame 0, this is my initial pose. And really, it's just kind of the anticipation or the build up to getting ready to do the run and jump. And so my body is in a neutral, relaxed pose, and then I begin the actual run and jump itself. And so I start here on screen left. We can see that kind of neutral, relaxed pose. And then we go into the run, the jump. You'll do a landing, recoil, and then possibly take maybe a step or two forward and go into another kind of relaxed settle-in pose. You do not want to continue running forward and off the screen, so we need a pose to land or stop on. And so that's why I recommend having it all in frame, and again, landing and stopping into a relaxed neutral pose. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind there with the footage, and I'll come back to this quite a few times here as we continue to work. Something else that you might want to refer to in here, there's a folder labeled cameras. Let me actually pull this to the desktop. I'm going to be referring to this here in a little bit, but this is going to be when we start talking about establishing your camera angle and why it's important for establishing your camera angles before we start blocking our poses. So we've got that there. The other thing you might want to refer to, so there is a Max for Maya rig. Now, this is the rig that I'm going to be using personally for this assignment. I really like Max just because the rig has a lot of control over how you can view the rig. And so when I get into more complex character animations, it's kind of nice to be able to isolate things and just focus on a particular body part. And so when I get into doing my in-betweens and cleanup animation, I start kind of similar with the walk cycle. I start with the legs and work my way up through the body. And I like to be able to just toggle off, let's say, the entire upper body and focus on just the legs. And so I'm going to use Max. I would recommend using Max, but you do not have to use Max. So I did say for this assignment, you can use any rig that you want. So if you go back to the classes section here, I guess week 3, when we started talking about rigs, those rigs are still there. All these rigs are already pre-approved, so you're more than welcome to use any of these rigs for this assignment. If you do find a rig that you want to use online, so if you get on Creative Crash or Turbo Squid or something like that, and you find a rig that you want to use, That's fine too. Just run it by me so I can make sure it has all the controllers that we need. We really need to make sure that it has an FK spine because it's going to make it easier to animate the spine when we go through this run and jump using an FK spine. I think someone used Spider Gwen. I can't remember who used that. That rig, as far as I could tell, didn't have a FK spine, and that one might be more difficult to do this run and jump with. So, again, if you do use a character rig offline, just run it by me first. Let me give it a once over and make sure it looks okay. But yeah. Let's see. Let me go back here. Is there anything else in that folder we might need to refer to? I don't think so. There are older run and jump references in here. I'm going to recommend that you don't use these. Only because they don't do the thing that I suggested that you do when you record or when we record the reference. So if we did look at this. So this is what it'll end up looking like when we shoot our own. We'll have a front and side view. The one problem with this is we get the nice kind of anticipation and idle pose on this, but most of these students actually ran off screen and didn't actually stop. And so we would like a nice resting final position for our final pose instead of just continuing off the side of the screen. So I wouldn't recommend using this reference. But yeah, I think that's everything there. All right, so let's actually start by creating our project or starting our project. And it's going to be the same as any other project that we've worked with. So we're going to start here in Maya. And let me actually... all right, so let's start by making our project folder. So up here in the top left-hand corner, we'll go File. Let's go Project Window. And then in the project window where it says Current Location, I'm going to click the New button in the top right-hand corner. And we'll stick with our standard naming convention. So this will be last name underscore first name underscore name of the project. So this is going to be our run and jump. And then we want to make sure it's going to the appropriate directory. Right now it's going to our network drive, which I don't want. I want it to go to the M drive. So where it says location, I'm going to click this folder icon and redirect it to the M drive. And I'll save it right in here. We'll hit select. I just want to re-verify so my project is named correctly and it's going to the M drive. Once I verify that, I'll go ahead and hit accept. Now let's start bringing in our files that we're going to need. So I'll minimize Maya for now. Let's open up the M drive. So there's our run and jump. The first thing I want to do, I want to go grab that rig. So let's open up a new Explorer window here. And in the week 5 folder, I'm going to go ahead and grab Max. So again, like I said, you can use whatever rig you want. But I'm going to be using Max. I'm going to right click and copy this. And then I'm going to go to my scenes folder and paste Max in here. Now, Max, all of Max's textures are procedural. So that's all I need to do for Max. If you do use a rig that you find online or one of the other rigs that use textures, just make sure that you're putting the textures in the appropriate location. In most cases, if the rig is set up correctly, those textures should go into source images. If you're Alfred and whoever made you set you up wrong, your images are in the images folder for some reason. But just make sure those textures get put into the correct directory. The other thing I want to do is so when you do have your reference, so if you're using mine or if you get your own, you'll want to make sure that it is in your project folder. So I'm going to take this reference that I'm going to use here, again, in the week 5 folder and copy it. And then I'm going to paste it into my movies folder of my project. So in my project folder, let's just paste that in there. All right, so we've got our rig, we've got our reference. Let's go back into Maya now and reference the rig in, because again, we want to make sure we're referencing our rigs. And then let's start setting up our preferences. So let me minimize this and open up Maya again. And then let's start by referencing the rig. I'm going to come into the File menu, and let's go down to Create Reference. And then if our project is set correctly, all we need to do from here is select the rig we want. So in this case, Max. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, hit Reference. It will reference Max in. Now, it is going to present you with this error. Again, Max is using dated shaders back when we were still using Mental Ray. It's not going to hurt anything. I'll just hit OK. I'm going to zoom out. And then there's a couple things I want to do just in terms of cleaning up the rig. One, you want to make sure all the controllers are zeroed out. I know with Max, his should all be zeroed out, so they should be good. One other thing I want to do, it would be nice if the facial controls weren't in the way. They're kind of visually distracting or noisy. Let's go ahead and turn those off. For Max to do that, it's in the display layer here in the bottom right-hand corner. At the top, there's one labeled Max for Maya version 1.14 facial win. Now, if you click the V icon for this display layer, it'll hide those, and they're no longer visible. The other thing I want to verify, so Max, I believe, is set up for IK spine by default. So I do want to check the spines and make absolutely sure that they are set up for FK. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to select this top spine controller and just take a look. So if your spine can only be controlled with translation, you have a IK spine, which we don't want. And so there's no rotation here. Let me undo that move. And so right now we're currently in IK. Let's go ahead and switch this over. Now with Max, the IK FK switch is hidden in the root. So I'm going to come here and select the root controller, which is this square controller. Over here in the channel box where it says spine IK FK, let's switch this from a value of 1 to 0. You'll notice the controllers change slightly in his chest now. And then if I grab these, I no longer have the ability to translate these, but I can now rotate them, like so, which is exactly what I want. Let's zero that back out. I don't want that rotation in there just yet. Anything else I need to check with Max? I think that should be it. So we have FK, spine. We've hidden the facial controllers. Okay, yep, Max is good. Next thing I want to do, let's just check the general Maya settings or preferences. So in the first thing I want to do is just make sure I'm animating at the correct frame rate. Look in the bottom right-hand corner. We should have this drop list. Just make sure it's set to 24 frames, which it usually is by default. The other thing I want to do is I want to check my default tangents, the default in and the default out. Now we talked about this a little bit with the walk cycle. With the walk cycle, we had in-betweens. With the run and jump, we are going to do 2 blocking passes. We're going to do a blocking pass stage 1, which is your key extremes, or the key poses. The second blocking pass we'll do once we finish the first. The second blocking pass ends up being your breakdowns, or your in-betweens. Again, that's usually the poses in between your key extremes from pass 1. So we want to focus on just the posing of our character in those blocking passes. We don't want in-betweens where we have in-between or tweening animation. So just to kind of show you the difference, if I were to, let's say, create a sphere. Now, don't do this. I would just watch for demonstration purposes. I'm going to take this sphere, and I'm going to use just sort of the default settings here in Maya and start setting some keys. So here on frame 1, I'll hit hit S to set a key. I'll go forward a few frames and drag the sphere over here, hit S to set a key, and then maybe go forward a few more frames and pull it up, and then hit S to set a key. Now by default, and again, if we're using maybe the same settings that we did with the walk cycle, we might have clamped and flat tangents, which inherently, by default, will set keys with in-betweens. And so if I left-click and drag on my timeline, we get the in-between animation. It's interpolating the movement between each set of keys. And so that's why we get this in-between animation. Now, instead of doing that, let's put the ball back here in the default position. I'm going to double-click on my timeline and just delete this animation. Actually, let me just do that. Oh, actually, it's going to make me do this, huh? Okay. All right, so we deleted that animation off of the ball. Now let's go set our settings. And so this is the part I would recommend that you do. If we go up here to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and then Preferences, on the left-hand side, or this left panel, there is a Settings category, and right under that we have Animation. So I'll select Animation, and then to the right, we have a category for Tangents. Right now, my default in is set to clamped, and my default out is set to flat. So what I want to do is I want to set my default in to flat, and I want to set my default out to stepped. So I have flat and stepped. Once I've verified that, I'll go ahead and hit save. And now by default, I will get stepped keys. And so if I were to grab my ball and here on frame 1, just hit S to set a key. I'll go forward, maybe to frame 60, and pull the ball forward and hit S to set a key. and then I'll go forward maybe to 120, pull the ball up, and hit S to set a key. And now, when I left click and drag through my timeline, you notice what it does is it's going to hold whatever the key is. So in this case, on frame 1, it's going to hold this key until I get to the next key, which is on frame 60. And then it's going to pop into place. So it's blocked. And now when I left click and drag from 60 to 120, again, it's going to hold. And then when I get to 120, it's going to pop into place. And then just to kind of see what this is doing in the graph editor, so if I come up here to Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editor, you can actually see that it's stair-stepping. And so that's why it's called stepped. So if I grab, let's say, the Translate Z and look, it's actually stepping or holding this value until it gets to the next key, and then it pops into place. And it's going to do this for any of the attributes. So in this case, Y, you can see it's going to hold. And then on that next change there on frame 120, it pops up into place. Now, this can be changed at any time. So let's say once we're done blocking, we want to add in-betweens. It's really easy to do. A couple ways you can do it. You could just double click on your timeline down below to highlight all of your keys, and then right click on the timeline, go up to tangents, and then go to flat. And you'll notice as soon as I do flat, it adds in-betweens. And so we now get that interpolation. And if I left click and drag, I now should have in-betweens on my animation. Let me undo that. Go back to stepped. Another way to do it, you could just left click and drag and select all of your keys here in the graph editor. And then with these selected, up at the top of the graph editor, we could hit the flatten tangent option. So if I hit that, it'll flatten those, and it gives me in-betweens again. Except for I have to make sure I do it on all the keys. Let me actually make sure I do that. There we go. And then I get in-betweens again. You can always make these stepped at any time too, the same way. So if I have all these selected here in the graph editor, and then at the top, hit the stepped option here, it'll reconvert those to stepped, and again, we have blocked animation. And so when you're animating, again, for blocking passes stage 1 and 2, we should not have any in-between. So when you turn those in, your character should be completely stepped. I know it's tempting to want to see those in-betweens, but again, I would recommend doing this just so we can focus on the posing of the character and not get distracted by the animation. All right, so we've got our default set up. Let me go ahead and minimize the graph editor. I don't need this sphere. I'm just going to take it and delete it. What else do we need to do? So again, we're going to be blocking our key poses. So again, we're not worried about the in-betweens at first. We just want to block the main poses and make sure we have strong dynamic poses with a good silhouette. We will do at least 2 sets of blocking, again, to create the initial key extremes, and then the second pass will be our breakdowns or our in-betweens. After we, to do this, to really establish those really solid, good, readable poses, we need to establish a camera. We need to pick a camera. The reason is that as animators, we cheat constantly. We rely on the camera to do this. We can cheat things like spacing for shortening, and you can really only cheat it from the camera that you're given. We also need a camera we can go back to so we can check our animation and make sure it looks correct. So again, looking at the silhouette to make sure we have a strong, clear, easy to read pose. And so again, once we establish that camera angle, we can cheat some of these things. The reason being is because the poses aren't going to look good from every angle. And so we want to establish that angle. And I guess to maybe kind of further exemplify this, just to kind of show you why camera staging is important before we start the actual animation process. Again, these videos are on Astar if you want to refer to them. The first example I'll look at is just looking at this character performance here. Let me actually open this in VLC. And so this artist is using camera and perspective to get a better read in terms of composition. So if you look here, there in the bottom left corner, this is the before, and the angle on the image to the right of that is the after. And really, they're just trying to create a better composition. So things are maybe a little more chaotic or not as organized in this left example. In the right example, everything's a little more compact and it fits within this kind of triangular composition, which just creates a little bit more appeal. And you can kind of see what they're doing to accomplish this. So in the right-hand corner, this first image is what the rig looked like before they started to modify and really change and adjust the rig to kind of create these elements of foreshortening and those sort of elements throughout the body. And in order to accomplish that effect, they had to really mess up the rig. So if you look at this bottom right-hand corner, they actually took the head and compressed it almost flat here in the side view. They took the arms. It's kind of hard to see because the image it's kind of small. But what they did is in terms of scale, to get that foreshortening, they actually compressed and scaled down the forearm and the hand. And then they actually did it with this leg too. You notice they actually really scaled that leg down to build in this kind of triangular composition. It looks good from this angle, but if you were to move the camera to the right side to actually see what it looks like, I mean, it looks horrific. And just to kind of see that with the camera move. Oh. So it looks fine from the front. And yeah, it's when you start to move. When you start to move to the side, it looks a little weird. Maybe a more extreme example. So this is a commercial I stumbled upon for a Japanese university. This is all animated in 3D with a heavy like anime aesthetic. Let's see if I can find a shot here. It's a short segment, so it's just this little bit here. So what's fine here? But in order to get this particular silhouette and shape on the character, again, it looks okay from this angle. But when you start to move the camera, that's when things start to fall apart. And so they had to really mangle this character rig's face to get the specific shape and silhouette they wanted. So we may not be cheating to quite this extent for what we're doing, but again, this is why it's important to establish a camera. Because that's nightmare fuel. All right, so camera. Let's close that. So let's go ahead and make a new camera. I'm going to come up here to panels at the top of my viewport. Let's go to perspective and do a new camera. It should automatically switch to be viewed from that camera that we just created. Let's name it. So over here in the outliner, I'm going to double click on this and call it main_cam. And then I do want to modify just one of the settings on this camera, which is the focal length. So just make sure the camera is selected. Over here in the top right-hand corner under the channel box, you should have a setting in here labeled focal length. So right now it's set to 35. It's a pretty narrow camera angle, and what I would like to do is maybe take this up to maybe somewhere around 50 or 55. So that's going to be closer to the realm of how humans naturally see the world, I guess, with the human eye. And so let's take this up. I'm actually going to put mine up to around 55. And then let's start to actually position the camera. So I'm going to zoom out. And I'm going to do about a 3/4 view, something like this. And kind of similar to what my reference is doing. And I shouldn't have closed this. I should probably just keep this open from now on. So I'm going to go back to my reference on the M drive in my project folder and open this with QuickTime. So I like to have this open in QuickTime just so I can frame by frame it. Any day now. Oh, there it is. And with this performance, again, I go from screen left to screen right. And so I'm gonna try to anticipate that with my camera. And here on frame 0, so I actually need to take my work area here, or playback range, and set that to 0 so it actually starts at frame 0. And then on frame 0, I want my camera to be kind of angled with my character in the top left-hand corner, because I know eventually the character is going to run from screen left to screen right over here. I might zoom out a little bit to give myself a little more room or space here. The other thing I want to do, just to make sure this is actually framed properly, I want to make sure my render settings are set at the correct resolution and that I have the resolution gate turned on. And so I'm going to come up here to the top and click on this clacker icon with a gear on it. It's going to open up the render settings. And under the common tab, I'm going to scroll down. And here where it says renderable camera, or actually image size, where it says preset HD 540. Let's kick that down to HD 1080. Once I have that selected, I'll hit close. Inside my camera here at the top of the viewport, I have two icons. I have one that is our resolution gate, which is a kind of a white outlined rectangle with a teal bluish sphere inside, or circle. This is going to be a resolution gate. Let's go ahead and turn that on. And then to the right of that, you have another icon that looks pretty similar, except for the box is now filled in. This is, it's kind of hard to see because of my viewport. Let me hold Alt and tap B to get a darker background. And so this next icon just turns on this border here around your resolution gate. It's up to you. It's kind of personal preference if you prefer that on or off. I like to have it on just because it frames everything nicely. And at this point, I just need to make sure that my rig is inside of my gate here. I don't want it to fall outside like this. And so I'm just going to get this kind of in the top left-hand corner like so. And that's going to be my initial camera. Now, to prevent myself from accidentally moving this camera, in the top left-hand corner, while I'm looking through this camera, I want to click this camera icon with a padlock icon on it. With that turned on, it just disables my ability to move the camera. Now, do keep in mind, once we start to animate this, and more often than not, this usually happens, but as my character moves forward here, there is a chance that I might run out of screen space here and they run off screen. If that does happen, it's not the end of the world. We can always unlock this and then maybe back the camera up a bit. So as long as we're not doing a major move with the camera, it should be okay to make minor changes as needed. But I think this will be a good starting position. Just know we might have to update this if our character runs off screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and relock that. I also want a ground plane. I'm going to come up here and hit create, polygons, and let's do a plane. And then I just need to scale this out in all directions here until I've got enough space to run on. I also want to name this. So over here in the outliner, let's name it. I'm going to call it ground underscore geo. And then I want to add it to its own display layer. So with this layer still selected, I'll come over here to the display layers and click on this icon that looks like a diamond or a plane shape with a circle on top. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. It's going to add a generic layer here at the bottom. I'm going to double click on that and rename it. I'll call this ground underscore layer and then hit save. And then your display layers, they're split into 3 columns. This last column here, right now it's currently blank or empty. If I click on it once, it'll go to template. If I click on it again, it'll go to render. And then what that'll do, if I deselect the ground and then try to select it again, it will not allow me to select it. So that'll just help prevent me from accidentally selecting and moving it when I don't want to. We can always toggle it off and on just by clicking this V icon here in the first column. So if I toggle this off and on, we can quickly turn that off when needed. All right, so that's our ground plane, our camera, our character's all set up. I think that's everything. Let me just give this a once over and see if I forgot anything. I don't think so. All right, so that's our scene or project all set up. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So let's go up here to File, Save Scene As. And then let's go ahead and stick with our naming convention. I'm going to do last name underscore first name underscore name of the project. So this is Run and Jump. And then I'm going to do incremental saves. So I'm going to do an underscore and I'm going to do a O1 and hit save. Now, I like to do incremental saves, especially with a more complex character animation like this. What I end up doing is I'll have a scene just for blocking past stage 1, a scene for blocking past stage 2, and then a new scene for my in-betweens. That way, if I really screw something up, I can go back to an older version without having to redo the entire animation. All right, so I've got that all set up. My new scene is saved. I'm going to go ahead and stop here just to segment the videos. So you'll have a video just for the scene set up, and then in the next video, we will talk about blocking.